Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Oh my goodness. Welcome to UI Mondays. My name is Alyssa Michael and this.
Oh, me? Yes. No. I'm Kathryn. I'm Kathryn Grayson Nance.
Sadly. Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, Kathryn and I are starting a new show Mondays, and the first Monday of the month we'll be together doing a joint episode, and then the rest of the Mondays we will do solo episodes talking about anything and everything around the front end. And so that's kind of where our passions lie. So I'm really excited. Today's topic, we have two amazing guests with us, Kevin and Kilian, and I'm going to mess up the pointing, so I'm just going to do this motion and the downward motion. And they're here to celebrate and talk about the State of CSS Survey results for 2021. So welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Kilian. Hi.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, maybe y'all could do a quick introduction, each of you guys. So maybe Kevin, you start. I've randomly selected someone.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Kevin, and I think I'm primarily known for my YouTube channel, where I pretty much just talk about CSS most of the time. And I just like to tell people that I try and help people fall in love with CSS, and if I can't get them to fall in love with it, at least to be a little bit less frustrated by it. It's sort of my mission statement these days, yeah.
That is amazing. A very worthy goal. And then, sorry, Kilian, you were starting.
Yeah, I'm Kilian. I'm the creator of the Polypane browser for developers. That helps developers make really good websites really fast. So I spent all my day thinking about how other people can be more productive.
Got some peeps in the chat. Ben D. Myers is yelling very frantically at you, hello. So I just
Hey, Ben.
like you should feel the vibe. And then we've also got Hey Thindle and Ivana Raptai. Hi everybody.
Thindle
I was planning on getting something done, but that's not gonna happen. Yeah.
Thindle was on this morning for me with Dev by Design, and so the fact that you were back, thank you. Also, hello again. Also, you really probably didn't get anything done today, did you, man?
Oh no, Ben, I love it. I like your franticness. And yeah, happy birthday. That was like the silliest thing. I was getting so much sass backstage before we went live because I was like, oh, is it a birthday? And I didn't actually see the birthday banner. And Kathryn was like, what gave it away? Like, yeah, I know. Listen, people, sometimes my brain's not here. It's not my fault. It just goes. Okay. So, hey, everyone. It's so good to see you. Vic and Coding is Weird. Good to see you all. I think Coding is Weird knows you, Kevin. I feel like that's a.
That was very. There's no punctuation. There's no hello or like. It's just.
Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, the State of CSS is a survey that Sacha Grief and his team, I think this is the second year. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is year 2. Wasn't yes? I'm getting some mild nods. So I'm just going to assume this is fact and we're going to move on with life. I know he started with the survey for JavaScript. And then he started like changing tactics for CSS, and now he's got the 2 surveys. But yes, I'm super excited. Always, I don't know, kind of. I feel like not for our 2 guests, but for me, going through the survey, it always kind of makes me hyperventilate a little bit because the front of the front end is where my heart is always laid. It's there. And so, so when I see all these things that I don't know, I'm just like, what is wrong with me? So I just have to know real quick. Kevin and Kilian, did you go through, and Kathryn too, did you go through, you're all K's but me? Oh, okay.
It's all right, Kalissa, you can do this.
Kalissa!
Nice.
That was beautiful. So when you went through the survey, or just the results afterwards, were you like 100%, I know all of this? Like, I just have to know before we start anything. Like, no? Kevin? No, come on, Kevin. Be real with me. I know you knew it all.
There was a couple of things. There was a couple where most things I
and
heard
Kilian,
of, I used
did you have it all?
So
Okay,
I mean,
wow, 100%. I love it. Oh, I love it.
But
so
I had been staring at, so I went through them before doing the survey because I helped out doing some stuff. So
So you cheated a little bit.
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
because I know I knew
knew
that you
them
authored the
being as well,
recap,
but
right?
yeah.
So I knew that you were like at least at the end you'd seen everything. But I feel like nothing surprised, or not much probably surprised either one of you. I get that feeling. So
Well,
but it's a nice
talk about
to-do list, honestly.
some surprising results.
No, I'm super pumped to get to those. And I think we can, Kathryn, what do you think? Should we pull them up? Should we dive in and get started talking about some of the exciting ones? I can plop your screen. I think it's this button.
Yeah. Yep.
I did it. I did the thing. And good morning to everyone. Legendary saying good morning. And we've got a bunch of, Thindle, my last name. It has a C, unfortunately.
Ooh.
But I'm just gonna go with Kalissa. That's as good as it gets today with the
I'm so sorry.
and good morning, Fuel. It's good to see the chat. They're all so happy and friendly
I do
this morning.
love this momentary panic from Fuel.
Okay. No, has a state. No. Like, what's another way of saying this? The current temperature of CSS? Huh? Yeah. The vibe, the CSS vibe of 2022. I don't know.
CSS Vibe Check.
It's a vibe check. Yeah. For the community on where they're at and also where CSS is at. So I love it. Okay. Kathryn, I know you made like this insane list of like, I want to talk about these bits. So was there anything at the very top overarching? I know we always like demographic is first, and I didn't know how much time, if any, we wanted to spend on that, or if you want to just go in order. But was there anything that really you were like,
For
oh,
that, I think this page really
yeah.
deserves to be reloaded.
Oh yeah, the animation is really nice.
reload it.
Oh,
Reload.
good point. That's another thing. We do
How
have a question in the
awesome is
chat.
that?
Who designed this site? Do we happen to know? Kilian?
It's mostly Sacha who designed the site, and then someone else designed this year's logo and T-shirt.
Right.
Nice.
Don't quite know their name, but I'm sure we'll see it on the next page.
Yes, the T-shirt, I believe, was listed.
Right,
Christopher
Christopher.
Kirk Nielsen. But I wasn't sure about the website. That's cool, though. I love it when UI designers get that credit. That's so rare in our field to be able to be like, someone designed this site. It was a person, a human who put thought and care into this. And it's never like, you can always flip to the back page of a book and see who designed the cover, but that doesn't happen on websites. So good question. Thank you, Legendary.
Oh, Silence says ciao from Italy. Hello. I always forget to say good morning and good afternoon. I know it's like really cover all our bases.
Some love for that animation.
The animation, I know that animation.
So good.
Like the first thing I want to do is just right click inspect. That's all I want to do. But I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and go out on a limb and say it's CSS. I'm just gonna make that assumption.
Yeah, good guess.
Kathryn's like, it's a GIF. It's a GIF. No, it's not.
That'd be
pretty funny.
That would be pretty funny. I did have to pull and drag.
like a GIF with like a little title on it of like got him. Like sassy.
Okay, that would be funny though. The alt text was just like stop snooping.
Okay, but like for real, like front end devs here, have you guys ever had like hidden anything in either alt text or something like that's not visibly shown, so like only developers inspecting the page would see it? I've put a couple little things like that before, like just comments saying hello, but no,
there's a little
nothing
log on my
Yeah, so definitely stuff in the source. And I also quite like it when websites put stuff in the console.log. That's always fun as well. Except if it's like Facebook does it, but it's like whoever told you to open the console is messing with you, so please close it again.
That was interesting. I've seen that one.
But
I just had to check.
Was that? Were they being silly? Is that like a
no?
just
They're being
close it?
serious because there's like stuff where people will try to like get your password or like your information or whatever. And so Facebook added
I thought they were
something
talking
saying,
to
like,
developers, telling them to close
No.
it. Oh, I'm with you now.
no.
Okay. It's like, wait.
So the
Oh.
opposite. No.
Oh,
talked to
Fendel
Alyssa
said I
something
was part of
about
the whole stop people from right click show source movement in the 90s. I didn't know there was a movement. Oh my goodness. I love it. Okay, so yeah. Anything first, Kathryn, that you'd like to hit on?
Well, I was going to ask, do you want to go in order, or do we just want to start with like top takeaways, things we thought were cool, things that stood out to us? I could go either way.
I feel like top takeaways, just because there's so much content. I feel like if we went in order, we wouldn't hit all of the top takeaways. But I just feel like there was a lot of cool things that was like, oh, and that. But maybe we'd also hit them all in order. No preference.
Yeah. So, well, then I'll go ahead and kick us off, because as you did note, I took weirdly extensive notes, honestly. I was very excited.
So much.
I'm always really excited about these. I find them super interesting. Just this much data feels like a really cool gift for us. And so a couple things stood out. I saw a bunch of mentioning of notable up and coming features. When else conditionals stood out to me. Cascade layers coming soon stood out to me. And then new color modes, P3 color modes. All stuff that I'm hyped about. It was also
Do you know what
interesting.
the answers were as far as audience knowledge of those things? Do you know if they were?
Top of my head, and those I don't think I wrote down like specifically. Probably it came
Where
from
they're at.
technologies, but this was just stuff where I saw they were repeated things that I saw come up a couple of times through the course of the results. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, let me see if I can find it, was in the discussion about frameworks. There's a huge discrepancy between what people are interested in and what people are using. And the shift was mostly, I'm like scrolling really fast, which I'm sure is annoying. I'm trying to find it because it was around, it was this one. Interest and then usage. Bootstrap is still king after years and years and years and years. Bootstrap is top of the list. But if you shift it towards interest, nobody is interested in Bootstrap.
Yeah, where is it? Where'd it go? It's not on the bottom. Is that really it?
It's the bottom. Which was so interesting to me that everyone is, it's middling low satisfaction, obviously super high awareness, and still king of usage by a significant gap. Like Tailwind's at 39, Bootstrap's at 85. But interest, nobody cares. They're done. We know it. It's old.
Do you think it's because it's just? Do you think it's just because it's not exciting and new, or do you think like there's a reason for that?
I think there's probably a mix. Definitely part of it is that it's been around for a while, I think. And again, I'm not basing this on data. This is just Kathryn gut feelings about Bootstrap. So, but it's been out for a bit. It hasn't changed significantly. But because it's been around so long, there's a lot of legacy usage. And I think a lot of folks, while we're interested in what's new and coming next, when we're talking about maintaining applications, we're talking about legacy. So probably a lot of people are still working in Bootstrap, even if it's not like hot and shiny and whatever. But I think the attitude around Bootstrap has shifted. And I haven't seen people talk happily, positively about Bootstrap in a while.
Listen, one of my first big talk was at NGConf. It was just a 5-minute talk. It was supposed to be 20 minutes, but they shortened me down to 5. And as you can imagine, that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah,
really, really fast.
And I've never gotten so much hate for a talk. I think I was before my time. The title was Giving Bootstrap the Boot. And people were just like very, hate mail about that talk. And I was just like, I'm so sorry. It was obviously my personal opinion. You don't have to listen to it. Like, people get very passionate. So it was probably like 4.5 years ago. So it was a little early. So hashtag Alyssa was right.
This is like, you know, the scene in Back to the Future where he like plays rock and roll on the stage and he's like, you kids don't know this yet, but you're going to love it.
But Tailwind, it's so funny. I was trying to come up with a butter campaign, like where we give out butter at conferences, because I thought that'd be a really weird thing to hand someone. I know, Kathryn, you just have to roll with it. It's the way I was like, I mean, come on. If you walked up to a booth and they handed you a stick of butter, would you not just be like, yes, like thank you for my butter?
Would it be salted butter?
I would be thrown.
I mean, I feel like you have to give the option, right? Some people need unsalted, so you got it. But the label, because I'm doing a Tailwind talk soon and a workshop, so the label was going to be for the Tailwind workshop promoting it, and it was going to be, I can't believe it's not Bootstrap. Get it? I can't believe it's not butter. Okay, come on, guys. Like that was hilarious. That was the best swag I've ever come up with in my life. But no, it's funny to see Bootstrap and Tailwind up at the top. Well, and the other one in the usage.
Yeah. Tops on usage. But yeah, that usage.
And then what's next? Materialize? Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Well, yeah. Any comments from Kevin or Kilian on like these rankings? I didn't.
So
I'm trying to read the smaller print.
What's always interesting to realize is that most of the web is legacy. So
yep.
Basically everything you work on is outdated, and if you keep up with what's new, then anything you work on that's more than a month old needs to be updated, or it feels old. So if you look at that long line of Bootstrap, you can probably split that out into Bootstrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and have it be like more evenly across the vertical axis. So I think that's an important thing to realize with all of these frameworks, that someone's idea of Bootstrap might have stopped with Bootstrap 3, and Bootstrap evolved, but they went on to something else. And maybe they'd like Bootstrap now, but they don't know. They moved on to, Materialize, Foundation, Tailwind, whatever. So I think that's always interesting to keep in mind when you have these huge discrepancies between usage and interest.
No, yeah, that totally makes sense. And I do wonder, like, if you broke it out between versions, what it would do to this chart.
Make it even less readable, but
were you about to jump in, Kevin?
I was just going to say it makes me think a little bit of jQuery with all the other things that are out there, because I think I'd be curious just if there's something similar in the State of JS, the next one that comes out, because I think jQuery still is on more sites than all the other, like React, Vue, Angular, all of that like put together still, just because it was so popular for so long. So I have a feeling it's a little bit of the same type of thing, where if you ask people now if they're interested in jQuery, everybody's going to say no, but it's still like anyone who has a legacy site is still maintaining it.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with using, I'm going to be the bad guy here, Bootstrap or jQuery. It gets the job done sometimes, so we should stop hating. It's just, if you wanted to get rid of one of those, there are options, obviously. So also, someone in chat said that Bootstrap is still GOAT. Does that mean good? Like, is GOAT the new hipster way of saying good? I need to know. Anyways,
it stands for GO, the greatest of all time. It's an acronym. I'm here for you. I'm not.
Sorry, I had no idea. I'm going to use GOAT in my everyday life now. Thank you for that. Wait, but we don't actually say GOAT because it's an acronym. Okay.
No, you have to make the sound.
My best GOAT impersonation.
So that we could have actually convinced her that was true.
You convinced me. You guys. All right, Kathryn, bring us up another one. Bring us up a goodie. Let's see.
Well, I think it would also be fun. Let's take a peek at some demographics. Obviously, I skewed pretty heavily English, which I think makes a lot of sense. Age was one that I thought was interesting, because you hear a lot of talk about kind of the idea of like aging out, I think, of tech. There's probably a better way to put that, but I hear a lot of folks that are a little bit older, and by a little bit older, I'll lump myself in, like 30s and 40s, that are feeling like it's hard to keep up. And I think a lot of that is that same kind of hamster wheel we talked about with like, there's always something new, there's always something to be learning, there's always something next. And we see a little bit of skew, I think, as well. When you hear about people that are senior developers or senior whatever, it's not necessarily a reflection of age or time spent so much as skill or aptitude, which is cool. There's definite perks to that. The flip side of that, though, is I think it can be easy to think about tech skewing younger, but there's also a pretty solid chunk of folks in this 35 to 44 age demographic, which I felt seen and relieved. But I think we think a lot about this, like 18 to 24, and sometimes the 20s, I would say, is probably what we imagine when we think about who's coding websites, who's building applications. But I found it reassuring that that's not necessarily true, that might just be an assumption we make. I'm
wondering as we get older if that demographic also shifts, or if it's just always going to stay. Because I was talking to some older devs, like really, really older devs, and they were saying you just get tired of all of it, and that's why people are leaving. So what do you guys have thoughts on that?
I think the web is young enough that it still needs to like age up. And then also, like, up until a couple of years ago, there were really only two paths out of front-end development, which is project management or like more general lead developer roles. And it's only more recently that front-end individual contributors are a thing, I feel. And I guess we'll be going to seeing more of them as time goes on.
Good call out here. COBOL demographics don't look like this. No, I imagine they don't. And you know what? I bet their salary demographics look different.
I was going to say, if you want to go to the salary one, that one probably looks totally different too.
Oh, man. Yeah, kind of probably should have scrolled down and taken this one in the same group, this years of experience, because we're seeing 5 to 10.
So it's mostly 5 to 10. So it's really mostly 5 to 20.
Yeah, evenly, I would say. Okay. I mean, exactly 22.3 evenly between 5 to 10 and 10 to 20 years, which makes a lot of sense. Kind of what you were talking about, like the web is growing up, because I think this is year 30 of the official like World Wide Web. I believe the World Wide Web is 30. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wait, are we sure that's accurate? What happened in 89? Because my birth year is 89, and I always thought that was. Is that not the year that the like internet or something was born or something? I thought that was
the internet and the World Wide Web.
Okay.
So
okay.
I recognize that that's like pedantic, but yes.
I love it. Was there anything else in demographics that like shocked you? I always feel sad about the countries, just because I really want like a perfectly even spread. I feel like maybe that's a pipe dream. I don't know. One day.
One day. I found this one interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kilian.
Yeah, what you need to realize there is that this is a mostly English demographic survey. So it's going to skew to at least Western countries. That said, there's a lot of work being done translating this survey and making it as accessible to other countries. So I hope that'll change in future releases as well, or in future surveys.
Can you give me a peek behind the scenes, Kilian, on how I just feel like there's so many people that help out with this, and it seems like impressive. Is there quite a few, like, is it just a massive team, or is it just like core people and then they take help as they need it? Because the undertaking sounds daunting.
So Sacha is really like the core team. He does most of the work setting it up, and then he just gets people around him to contribute stuff. So if you go back to the introduction page and then scroll down, then you can you get an overview of who did what.
Nice.
So
Yeah, the
there's
translation.
like
Oh,
there's
cool.
translation help, and then up there is Sarah helped out with accessibility. I did some mobile testing. Christopher obviously made the logo, etc. And there's not really like a team or meetings or whatever. It's just a GitHub repo, and people contribute to it.
Wow,
So
that's
you all can
awesome.
contribute too. If you have a good idea or a suggestion, you can open a PR or an issue.
I don't think I knew that it was effectively completely open source. That's really cool. So
it's
take
honestly,
notes, guys.
it's like, I know. I was like, I don't know if I've seen an open source project that's just like you're saying, there's not actual meetings of like everyone's involved and like you do this, you do that. Like, so I'm just like amazed that it all has come together as it has. And I am excited about its continuation. So that's really, really cool.
I'm going to hop us back real quick just because I thought it was interesting. There's a little bit of talk in the chat about salary.
Oh, yeah.
So I thought it might be interesting to take a peek at the yearly salary results, with the highest being a pretty large range, honestly, from 50 to 100K US dollars. But
Yeah, I know for me that one take, if you switch from there from all respondents to by country, I think it paints a bit of a different picture too, just because the US is so much higher than everyone else.
That is a really good note. Thank you for calling that out.
Oh,
but I think that's a bit of the...
Can someone explain this chart? Because I just really get overwhelmed with the colors. So the pink means high amounts and the blue means low amounts. And then it's okay. I think,
yeah.
Okay.
They correlate here along the top. So lighter being higher, with the lightest band up here being more than $200,000 a year.
I feel like the really confusing part though is how do you do this math with money not being the same value, right? Like it's not a 1-to-1, I assume.
Yeah,
right?
So I think that's in part why US salaries are different to other countries. Of course, also because of the market. And I think Kevin in his video had some very good points about that. But yeah, so if you want to buy a house in San Francisco, I'm told, you need
don't do that.
bit more than say here in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Alyssa just bought a house, so she's like nodding.
I'm sorry.
Not in San Francisco, but
like if I turned the camera, you'd see the boxes. It's just like this weekend, so it's pretty fresh. You're kind of the wound, Kilian. But I'm not in San Francisco. We looked out at the coasts, and it's just amazing the difference. And so, I mean, I'm assuming it's the same with all countries. There's just different parts that are like what, like that skew everything. So, yeah.
That was interesting. The last piece I want to call out in demographics, just before we move on, because it's a little near and dear to my heart. I'm always really interested to see the gender breakdown. And as it's kind of noted here, this is a sensitive issue and not everyone is going to fall into a categorical, surveyable answer. I thought it was really great that we had a non-binary, gender non-conforming section so that people could answer with what they are most closely identified with. But it was interesting to me, as always, the huge skew towards male developers. So, no, someone notes it doesn't add up to 100%. I believe that's because no questions are mandatory.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That seems so obvious. And yet I was like, wait, what?
We could flip it over. I believe there was a way to show that.
Oh.
So here, yeah, we can see survey respondents, which is what was shown in the original. And then we have question respondents, which is people who answered this specific question. So, that being said, just worth noting, I think. And I think also worth noting that this percentage is the percentage of women and non-binary and gender non-conforming individuals is almost certainly going to be higher in the State of CSS one than it will be in the State of JavaScript. We've seen the industry skews especially like front of their front end, a little bit more. We see a higher percentage of women, non-binary, gender non-conforming individuals in the front of the front end, which I find interesting. I don't know that we can point at something and say like, this is why, and that's why, but it's a piece of data that I think is cool to keep an eye on and see how it shifts year to year. And it will be cool to see if that will shift. Hopefully it will towards a little bit more parity in the future.
Erin was saying this is a problem that we need to fix. I think many passionate individuals and companies know that, and I have full hopes that it will be. I really do. I see programs in schools that are even affecting like my nephews right now, and I'm like, wow, they're teaching 14-year-olds JavaScript now. That's awesome, right? Yeah. So I feel like that's where we have to start. So I have hope, and I think it'll get there. I really do. So
I do too. And there's people out there, girls who code, Black girls code, all doing amazing work on shifting that pipeline. I think we will see that start to shift, because someone else also called out, taking a look at the next graph, that also there's also a huge disparity, like huge gap. But I think the change has started. I continue to believe that we will see that shift continue to happen. So,
yeah,
I think we can will it into existence.
For me, one of the depressing things is I did talk about this with my audience, and I didn't even spend too much time, because last year I did, and there was a lot of talk sort of about the demographics. So this year I just sort of, when I mentioned, and I said like, whatever, as a white guy who's fitting into the exact thing, I'm like, it would be nice to see, or see this continue to develop and add. And there's obviously a lot of support for that, but it's really depressing the negative comments you get whenever you mention anything about something like that. And I'm just like, I don't know if it's people feeling attacked or what it is, but it is.
I've been blessed to not receive those, so I'm really sorry, Kevin.
Oh no, it's fine.
Kathryn, have you? Because I feel like I bring this up often enough, and people are always like, "Move the needle." So I'm sorry if you've gotten the opposite.
It always surprises me, and especially like I'm lucky in the sense that like my YouTube channel, the comment section, like there's no negativity at all, which I think for YouTube is very incredible. Not the normal. But anytime something like that comes up, there's enough, and again, it might only be 5 people, but it catches me off guard because I'm not used to seeing anything. But I'm just like, why? Like, I don't know, like how. I'm really curious about like
difficult
why that seems like a negative to want to have more diversity in anything. It just shocks me, I guess, and it's a little bit depressing. But hopefully the numbers, despite that, the numbers keep improving, and we can sort of make a more inclusive environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of hit on what Thindle's saying of, I have nothing against people fitting the mold. I just want the mold to be bigger. And I completely agree. And I think we can't go in the opposite direction of like restricting things, because then it's in the, it's the same thing, but in the opposite direction. And so I loved the way you put that, Thindle. And I thought that was really good. So, but no, do you know if the demographics, I know it was only a year difference, but do we know if the demographics changed from last year? I don't remember the numbers, but I should know if any of you off the top of your head were like, they were pretty much the same, or they?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't
no
remember.
worries.
I was hoping there was maybe something I could skew here, because in some of them,
that
like
toggles
that changed it. But
okay.
Right.
So yeah, what else? Any other tidbits? What's next?
I want to take us over into features, because I found features is I don't want to say I play favorites, but I think this is my favorite part. Because there's inevitably something in the feature section that I have not yet heard of. And this is the part where I'm like scrolling through, like, write that down.
I'm like, and here is my checklist for the year.
Well, and there's so much CSS, I feel like in the last year and think the next year or two, we're seeing huge shifts as compared to what I've experienced. If you compare back to the last 5 years, 10 years. It feels like.
Does anybody know why? Like, why would it move more now than it has in the past? Is that? I'm like curious if like the board changed, or like whoever's in charge of the spec is like, it's time.
The cynical answer is Google is pouring a lot of resources into changing CSS. and they are by far the biggest force or forcing function for change in CSS at the moment. Though at the same time, WebKit, Apple, is also innovating and leading the charge with, for example, the has selector. So there's just a lot of stuff happening right now, and different things that fall into place. So for the WebKit part, but also for Firefox, Igalia or Igalia, not sure about the pronunciation, is doing a lot of work. So that's like a different company that works on WebKit and Gecko and Blink, and gets paid by other companies or individual contributors even. So they bring a lot of stuff to the major rendering engines, and that's only been going for a few years as well. So I think that is also making a lot of change.
Okay.
There's a little bit of an interesting conversation happening down here in that someone asked who made Flexbox. Someone else jumped back, WC3. My general understanding of how new features work, and I wanted to bring this up so that I could be publicly corrected, which is my favorite way to learn.
It's always good. Yeah.
But my understanding is that when there's new ideas for specs, they're brought up to the CSS working group. And the working group takes them and tries to kind of feel through what would need to happen and what that would look like, and kind of boundaries and rules and execution, and well, what would that break, and are there other things that would need to shift to accommodate this? And that gets kind of worked through a process until it's put into an official recommendation, which is then adopted by browsers and eventually implemented. W3C is almost what I missed. Please
tell us what's missing.
So now it's my turn to be pedantic. Things can only become a recommendation when they have 2 browser implementations.
Oh, I had it backwards.
So before that, they're drafts. And then when they have at least 2 competing implementations, then they can become a recommendation. I don't think this was always the case. And that led to things being recommendations and browsers saying whatever, which, in the end, the browsers are more important than whatever the W3C decides to write up. So I think this is a good rule.
A browser can technically implement whatever rules they want, right?
Yeah, that's called Internet Explorer.
Be a good idea. Yeah.
He said it out loud.
Yeah, the chat agrees. The chat agrees.
It's like, cut his line. He said okay, no, I'm kidding. But no, for real, it really kind of blows my mind that everyone is expected to not break things on their end and to try and play nice with each other. Like, it's just, it's not a rule, it's an expectation, like a hope.
I think it's just because we went through those dark days, right? Like, I very much remember when browsers were a completely different ballgame, and you would just load a site and it would be like, no, not for you. Like, come back in Internet Explorer, or come back in Netscape Navigator, or like whatever, we made it through that Wild West, and we all kind of agreed and said, like, oh, we don't talk about that. We don't do that anymore.
So, fun fact, the reason Internet Explorer won the browser wars is because they implemented CSS first.
That is a very cool piece of internet history.
What? Was it was it like a day before, or was it like quite a good bit? Do you know?
Quite a good bit. Like,
okay.
Well, because
when I was still very, very young, it wasn't completely clear that CSS was going to be the thing. So there were actually a couple of competing things. Like, of course, before we had styling in HTML with font tags and color attributes, etc. But but there were quite a few like CSS alternatives being floated around. And IE chose CSS, and Netflix Netscape chose something else.
They were so far ahead of the game, y'all.
And then it ended up being CSS, and everyone enjoyed that much more.
Do you remember the name of a CSS alternative?
There were a lot. I think the one that existed was called JSS. But
Alyssa's like,
I need to
"We've
go.
come
I'm
full
sorry. I'm
circle."
like gonna go Google real quick. Okay, sorry. I'm just totally like testing your esoteric knowledge just for funsies. Sorry about that. So on these, Kathryn, is there a feature that you want to start with? I want to have time to get to some. I know we're.
Oh gosh, maybe we should each take a turn. I want to hear what you guys are excited about. I talked a little bit about what I was hyped about, but like maybe Kevin, you want to start us off? Is there an upcoming CSS feature either here or outside of these cute little bubbles?
Well, there's so many. I don't know. I mean, in a way, I'm a little bit concerned with just talking about like how all the browsers playing nice. Like right now, because there's so much in the pipeline, I am a bit concerned that everyone sort of will do what they want out of all of them and like right now, Safari is already implementing has, whereas
Safari's
there's
ahead
other,
on a bunch of stuff.
the grid implementations in Firefox are ahead, and Chrome might go in a different way because they're working on container queries a lot. And so like eventually I think there'll be sort of a shift out and then a shift back in as everyone sort of catches up on what the other guys already done. But there might be some frustration in this year, particularly where one features in one browser and another features in another one. But I guess for me, I mean, I talked about it a lot at the end of last year, which was Subgrid. Subgrid's been around in Firefox for 2 years now, and hasn't been, it's the level 2 spec of Grid. And I think when Grid happened, it went so fast, all the browsers got on it, and it was like, okay, this is great. Subgrid's going to come around right away. Firefox implemented it super quickly, and then no one else cared, which was really depressing. And I played a lot with
Do you think it's just not needed? Like, why are people slow on the Subgrid pickup?
I know the only reason Chrome and, well, it's Microsoft's the one who's working on the Chromium implementation right now. But the only reason that's even possible, from what I understand, is because Chromium has the new layout engine now. So I think there were some technical hurdles that were in the way previously as well. Because it's one of those things. And it was also, I think, the idea that people said like, oh, we don't, do we really need it? We can do, prioritize things in other places. Because I'd played with Subgrid, and once you played with it, it was like, oh my goodness, like this is what Grid really should be. It overcomes a lot of the issues you could potentially run into with it. And I was so excited for it, and it's been depressing. So I'm really happy to see that it's coming in Chromium, and I'm hoping, I keep thinking Jen Simmons is the one who pushed it at Firefox. So I'm hoping now that she's with Safari that we'll see it not too far behind. That would probably be my number one.
Are you saying that's the only reason now on Safari to make
she's
this
a
push?
personal
like,
powerhouse? I would completely believe it. Yes.
She was such a,
she's making the rounds.
She's incredible.
But I mean, just speaking of like how the proposals are made and everything for the different things, like she was part of the group of people that created Grid in the first place, from what I understand. So, and created the spec for it all. And so was, I could see her being like, come on, guys. She's already got their Grid inspector to be probably the best one now. So I could see her doing a big push behind the scenes right now try. I'm hoping, because that'd be a really big game changer that I think people aren't as aware of. Like, you have container queries that I'm also really excited about, but I think everybody's really excited about that. So sort of my more dark horse one would be Subgrid. I'm just looking really fast if there's something else there that jumps off, but that would be my
Kevin
really big
or
one.
Kilian, do you know, as far as, because it's kind of a black box to me as far as how things actually get passed and nominated in this process. And Kilian, you were saying that like this website, for instance, there were no meetings. It was very open source. Is that how it goes down with the working group? Or like there's just like a GitHub with a spec and they all just kind of comment on it? Or do they actually meet? Like, do we know?
Oh, so the W3C has quite a lot of can't think of the English word, but like ways of doing work or methods. So another thing in recent years that probably has helped with faster adoption of new CSS is that everything happens on GitHub. Before that, everything happened in news groups. So you had to be on an email list. So I think that really helps. So again, any one of you, if you have any comments about any piece of new CSS specification being worked on or old CSS specification that exists, you can just leave a comment or an issue. And, you know, there's no guarantee that they'll actually engage with that, but you can have your voice heard. And then from my understanding is that a lot of discussion and like gathering of information happens in these GitHub issues, and then they have meetings in IRC where they hash out like specific next steps, decisions, etc. And those then get logged into GitHub again. And the way these meetings are run is again also like a bit esoteric. Like there's rules, and you have to press or send a plus message on IRC, and that puts you into the question queue, and then the moderator can award you like speaking time, and there's all
my
like
gosh, this
song and
sounds like the
dance.
coolest thing to be a part of. It's almost
make everything
medieval.
happen.
Oh! That's so cool. Sorry, I know it's also probably slow and cumbersome, but also really cool. Like, that's awesome.
I will say that was this is a really old school comment, was my first thought as soon as you said IRC. I was like, interesting.
I'm sorry. Anytime someone mentions IRC, I'm like, man, they must be so cool. Like, it's like this legit thing you're doing, like talking on IRC chat. Oh my gosh. Like, okay. No, that is exactly the next question that Pendle brought up. Yeah. Did W3C name themselves? Is that a...
I imagine you
what is
I can't...
ETF? Do you know? Do you know what this is? I don't know what IETF is. Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was like an alternative to the working group. I'm just, okay. I just want to make sure there wasn't some other big
Internet
thing out there.
Engineering Task Force would be IETF. Which is currently getting roasted in the chat, yes. You know what? As they say, the two hardest things in software engineering are, what is it? Recursive stuff, naming and off by one errors. So I think it's completely fair that everything has a terrible name. We're historically not great at this.
I would be disappointed if it was named well, right? Like, come on. Like this comment, all those people in the 90 to 100% column on knowledge score, can I hire them and they can have my job? And then Fuel was saying, I assume they're lying. Okay, so I totally would have been with you, Fuel, except the people here with me are in that column. I am not. They are. So I don't know. Maybe they're not lying. Maybe I'm just like really need to study harder at nights. I don't know what's going on with the 90%, the 90% people.
I mean, I think everyone's going to have different things that they are especially good at and things that they focus in on. So like there's going to be someone who's like super, super into anything, even especially some of the stuff that isn't quite out yet. I mean, a lot of this, when we're saying like, you know, what is it or whatever, it's because you can't really use it yet. It's not fully supported. Things like color is one that I'm really excited about. The usage ratio is low because my understanding is that currently it only works in Safari. So
yeah, and essentially only on MacBook.
You know,
if you click on each one of these, does it go into a different chart? Like, can you click on color or does it not?
No, it just hovers a little thing that will tell you that split between people who know about it versus people who have used it, and then what that like ratio looks like. So, but yeah, I would say grain of salt with all of these because some of them, like Houdini, I believe, is still in the experimental phase for everything across the board. Like, I think you can use it if you have like one of the experimental dev browsers and nowhere else. Maybe not even that. I may be wrong there. It might still just completely be a proposed spec.
might
So
be in
don't beat
Chrome.
yourself up if you haven't heard
So
about it.
CSS Houdini is in Chrome, but
Okay.
CSS Houdini covers a lot of different things, and Chrome has only implemented a few of those. So one of
What's it-
them that you can find in the wild is you can use CSS Houdini functions, which are JavaScript, to paint backgrounds for HTML elements.
Okay.
So, for example, you could do very fancy gradients using JavaScript rather than using an image.
And Houdini is just the kind of the word, the name we've given to the paint API,
Yeah, so
right?
that's the overall thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Excellent comment here. Knowledge is being able to read documentation. Like, honestly, yes. Before we move on, were there any other either upcoming or current CSS features that folks want to highlight, talk about, hype
Yeah.
up,
So
dunk on? No.
the last row from the bottom, the fourth from the right is prefers reduced data. And that ratio
one
makes me
is-
really sad.
Oh.
Support isn't here yet. You can try it out in Chromium plug and in Polypane. But once support lands, this will help everyone create faster websites for a very large portion of the internet. So essentially, this is a media query that will inform you as a website owner that the user visiting your site wants to use less data. So you can use that to hide background images, not load fancy web fonts that are, a megabyte, not autoplay video, all these things to make your own website faster. And I think that will nearly instantly result in your website being more visited as well.
An incredibly relevant comment down here.
Oh my gosh, right? I don't, can you not watch it in lower? That's weird. I'm confused. I will, yeah, Ivana said
it's a media
absolutely.
query, so
yeah.
it's add media, prefers reduced data, : reduce.
And then to our friend who's Jiva, yes, you can adjust the video quality. If you click on the settings icon, you can. No? Oh, nope. Only 1080 is possible to choose. Never mind. Which actually, I think, kind of going to segue us back. I read a really interesting article on prefers reduced data where someone was making an interesting case saying that it was one of those things that could be a double-edged sword in that lower income groups and folks are more likely to be using that kind of reduced data or not have a stable internet connection. And was there a possibility for discrimination by using a media query that would allow you to basically target your higher earning website visitors in kind of a reverse
Yeah.
Oh my
engineering way?
gosh, I've never even thought of it that way. That's horrible
I
and
hadn't
also
either.
really relevant.
So
Oh.
the data that prefers reduced data is based on, or the as a website owner, you can already get information on someone's connection
true too.
speed and location, etc. So this stuff is already happening, but you're right. You could get like the Uber search price when your battery is below 10% type stuff.
Right. Exactly. Which exists everywhere. I mean, this is one example of potential misuse, but the real truth is that if someone's out there to misuse data or the abilities that we have through JavaScript, through CSS to see information about people, then there are 1,000 ways to do that. Like you said, unfortunately. And it really comes down to us as developers to
I
make
think
ethical
the benefits of this one far outweigh the downsides.
In general, I would agree. I just found that to be a really interesting thing that I had not thought of, and it's kind of stuck with me when thinking about prefers reduced data. Not to totally be a lead balloon on all of this.
No, I just think it's really unneeded because it hadn't occurred to me. So I think just bringing it up so that we can do our best.
Yeah.
More
As Phil
data
says,
means more accuracy.
Yeah.
and that can be great, and it can also be bad. So, all right. I'm going to scroll this on unless there's anything anybody wants to jump in with on features. I think I'm just going to kind of click us through here, and when we see stuff that's cool. Oh, this is just a breakdown of each one of those kind of features. So unless there was anything specific.
So I was totally wrong because it says there's a 2019, right?
Oh,
So this
yeah,
is the
you're
third
right.
one, not the second one, right? Yeah. Look at me being all wrong. Not on this page, though. I think these are for added things. There it is. 2019, 2020, 2020.
You're right.
Gotcha.
You're right. So yeah. Nice. Our third year.
It is really cool, though, to see the differences between the years. I love that. And I'm excited for like 10 years from now, like just seeing the data and what it does. Oh, adopt says, so what the top right corner is good. These charts always get in my brain.
I thought this was a really cool layout. I really enjoyed this part of the survey
count,
results.
satisfaction.
Basically,
yes.
What they did was looked at usage rates and satisfaction rates and then kind of grouped them. So things that have low usage and like low satisfaction got grouped into this avoid. Sorry, my dog's going crazy downstairs. I don't know if you can hear him. He's very excited about SAS. So
Makes sense.
whereas things that had high usage and high satisfaction, which currently just SAS. So like, good job, Apollo. You knew what was up. Like, and then otherwise we have things that fall into like that mix. If it was high satisfaction, low usage, it was worth assessing, but maybe not jumping into. And then things that were high usage, low satisfaction means maybe you're using it and it's time to reevaluate, see if there's a better option out there.
Oh, I see.
AKA bootstrap. But I found this to be really, really interesting. And I like how this was split out into processors, frameworks, and CSS and JS. Because I think a lot of times all of this kind of gets lumped together into just like CSS stuff, when in reality they're very different and solve very different problems and serve very different purposes.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, we got some thoughts over here.
I saw that. That's why I was like, oh, Thindle.
It really did decisively shift to SAS. Although I will tell you,
I was going to say, I think it's decided, right? Like no one should be like.
I will tell you, the company I worked at before this one ran less on their Angular application. Okay. So
wow,
it's not dead.
Okay.
It's not gone. It's out there. But yeah, if you were to learn something new, if you were starting fresh, and you weren't working at a company that already had an opinion, then I would say probably SAS. But there's also a little bit of truth that if you're not the decision maker on your team, then some of this might be a little less relevant. You'll learn the technologies that are relevant to the application that you're maintaining. Kind of falls back into that bootstrap thing that we were laughing at earlier, where like a lot of us are working on maintaining legacy applications, and that might not mean that you're on the forefront or you get to make the decisions or you get to assess, adopt, or avoid at your own will.
Yeah, so Mark said vanilla CSS is the future. Yeah.
I happen to agree.
One interesting thing to notice here is that all the CSS in JS frameworks are sort of at the top left.
Yeah, that's a really good note.
The takeaway from that is that the CSS in JS concept is still so young that everyone's still experimenting and figuring out what the actual best way to do this is. And you'll see in the coming years, like some of them will move to adopt, though if you look at this chart, there's only one dot in adopt, so we as developers are not super satisfied or not quite so quickly satisfied. But yeah, we'll see like a bunch of them fall away, and then a few winners that find the right mix of features.
I'm excited to see which ones pop over. Pendle wants to know, what is pure CSS? Do you guys know? I personally haven't used it.
No idea.
I've heard of it. My understanding
Which color
is
it?
What color is it? Yeah, let's see.
I believe it's a framework. Yeah, it's down here.
Pink, yeah.
My understanding of pure is that it's basically a series of like predefined variables almost, so that you can just like reach for stuff and grab real quick instead of building your own. I haven't used it, so I can't speak to, is it great? Is it worthwhile? But I would say, based on the smart people who replied to this survey, there's a high level of satisfaction. And it is relatively new, so maybe give it a shot. People seem to like it so far. I'm trying to switch. Yeah, there we go. Frameworks. Yeah, here's pure.
Okay,
Rising
wow.
up. So, at least in satisfaction. Tailwind remains king of satisfaction. Although it might just be that whatever brainwashy cult thing they do made people go seek out the survey. No, I'm
joking. Okay, but like
I've heard
really,
a lot of people passionate
it's
about a
funny,
lot of technologies, but I've never heard anyone as passionate as Tailwind users.
It is so hot right now.
It's
Like,
oh
yeah.
my god.
And I'm just like, okay, all right, I'm just gonna accept it. All right, I'm not gonna fight against it. I have fought these fights before, and so I'm just like, yes, I will teach the people what they ask for. That's where I'm at in my life. So maybe that's horrible. I was called a traitor by many of my friends. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, it's really easy to have an opinion on things that don't matter a lot, which is why I like to have strong opinions about technology.
I love that so much. Oh, I love it. Let me see.
Yeah.
So can you go to the CSS and JavaScript one? I wanted to see if there was any interesting bits on.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place over here. Look at this.
Like, how do I read this? I don't know how to read this.
So we've got a comparison year over year. And right now we're looking at satisfaction. Let me know if you'd like me to switch it to interest, usage, or awareness. So we're ranking various CSS and JS solutions, and we're seeing the shift along with new things that have entered the market, like Windy, which did not exist to be polled in 2019.
Right.
And things that are rapidly moving down as better options come around.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this shows what Kilian was saying before, that it's something that's so young that there's just a lot of different ideas around it, and I think this is going to stay.
Yeah.
Or even I'd be curious if slowly there's less options at one point, because as the ideas get a little bit more matured and all of that. But I guess we'll see what happens.
I think so. I'd imagine that in another few years it'll look kind of like that processors list. Where things have kind of steadied out and folks like what they like and use what they use, and maybe we get an occasional newcomer.
The differences in those lists, they just crack me up. That is funny.
Well, because I mean, both SAS and Less have been around for a while, years, at least 5 or 6 years minimum would be what I would confidently say.
Do you all have opinions? Just like a really quick hot take on like why SAS won was. I don't have any experience with Less. I just know it's not SAS, and that's where
Superior
my knowledge.
Branding. No, I'm joking. SAS is cuter. Have you looked at the SAS website?
It's pretty cute. Yeah.
No, but no, I would be interested in a real
anything. Yeah.
I started with SAS when I picked one, and then it seemed that that was at the time Less was a lot more popular, I think, and I don't know why I went with SAS, and then it just seemed to be the right one as less and less people were using Less. So yeah, I don't know.
You just got lucky? Like
Sendel makes a good point. Les was
Bootstrap.
first, but Bootstrap used Sass.
Yeah,
And-
and also less was based on Python, so it was a little more work to set up correctly. Whereas Sass was just a binary. It's Node now, or Dart, but it was a binary.
Okay.
I always choose the wrong
And
pick. It's a skill.
I do hope everyone is slowly moving to Post CSS though.
Oh, interesting.
It does look.
I have not used Post CSS.
That's a really good hot take. Can you tell us why?
So, Post CSS is not necessarily a competitor to Sass or less. In fact, you can use them together. So Sass is a preprocessor. So you can write Sass and then process that to CSS. And then you can use Post CSS to process that to new CSS, for example, in your browser. So you can think of it like Babel, but for CSS. So Babel will take your fancy ECMAScript 6 or 2021 and then sort of down compile it to something that current browsers understand. And Post CSS can do the same using
Wait, are you
Post CSS
saying that you would
presets
use
and-
this so that you can use things that don't exist yet in browsers?
Yeah, like nesting. But Sass does that as well, of course. But the benefit is that the nesting in Post CSS is based on the CSS specification. Sass existed before that specification, so it doesn't quite match. So the neat thing is that you can write your CSS in Post CSS, and then gradually you'll have to compile less and less of your CSS because like the stuff you wrote just works in browsers now.
I guess the part I'm a little confused about is it sounds like Post CSS is something that you just do to your CSS. You don't actually write it, but you're saying you are writing it in a certain way.
So Post CSS is really just an architecture that you can put plugins to. Okay. And you would write CSS as if you could write it in the future. So for example, I use nesting and I use custom properties for media queries, etc. And I just use them as if they were already here.
A thing.
And then I use Post CSS to compile that to something that the browser can actually understand because the browser doesn't do nesting yet.
Well, like how does it work with things like has? Like what's the supplement for that? Like,
so there are things you, of course, can't.
Okay, cool. I was like, if you know magic, tell me your magic. Okay, cool. Cool.
The is selector is really just like you can rewrite the is selector to having a bunch of selectors with a comma between them. So that's what Post CSS does. But you can also write your own Post CSS plugins. So, for example, I wrote one that lets you write CSS in Dutch. It's useless, but it's a lot of fun. And then I also wrote one that lets you write :hocus instead of :hover, and then the entire selector again, :focus. So that saves
you found
a lot
your
of typing.
audience.
Yeah, I was like, Mark is Dutch. He needs it. He needs it. Is this published somewhere? Is this live?
It's Post CSS Dutch style sheets on NPM.
I bet if you wrote one that just let our British friends write color correctly when they wrote CSS, they'd be thrilled. That's the #1 complaint I see on Twitter. Is everyone like, this hurts my soul?
Is it? Oh, that's funny.
Oh, people that spell color with a U hate to write it without it in CSS.
That's
I'm in Canada, so I can confirm that we do it with a U here.
But like you don't have something that changes it in your CSS, Kevin. You have to write it with just oh my.
Look at him just taking that.
Yeah. Kilian, I wanted to ask on your conversation you just had, since you're using the Post CSS method, are you personally also doing Sass or are you just?
No. So what I would use Sass for, I now just use like the CSS native things for. So CSS custom properties and native nesting.
Right. That's one thing I had this like big like life, like what am I doing with my life? Because I have this workshop that I've been teaching, and last year, like the last version of it I was doing, I was like, I'm explaining how to do Sass, and I'm explaining the difference between CSS custom properties and Sass variables, and like teaching beginners this stuff. And I'm like, am I wasting their lives? Like, what am I doing? Because I had this, like, it was like somebody in the chat was like, vanilla CSS is the future. It is. We're almost there. And I think it was my husband. He's also a developer. He was like, you need to calm down. All right. Like, this is not 911. I was like, but their people need to know, like, what's important. So, but it's good to know. I love this post CSS idea.
I would still throw my hat into Sass being useful, but I think it depends on the size of the project to a large extent. Like if you're doing a small personal project, there's a few things with it that can be handy, and a few mix-ins that I use mix-ins, and I have a few that I use in every project, so it makes my life easier. But if you start getting into like creating design systems or other stuff, just like I have a function that runs through, like I make a Sass map for my colors that I find really easy. It just looks like a JSON file basically, and then that gets output into like custom properties, and that can get output into utility classes and other things.
Do you have like a YouTube video or an article showing this? Because I just like afterwards need to go geek out about that. That is so cool, Kevin.
Yeah, I think I did it on a YouTube video. I know I've done it on live streams, but I think I might have put a video on it as well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
She's gonna track you down after this and grill you on it.
So for like stuff like that I think won't really, like, I don't really think CSS should implement like functions the way Sass can do it. That's what we have a preprocessor for, but I'm still like native nesting. Like it's sort of like with custom properties. When we got custom properties, like I use my Sass map to get turned into custom properties because I prefer them. They're more powerful. You can do better stuff with them a lot of the time. So the more native implementations we have, the better. So I do think Sass will find a bit more of a niche rather than being this thing that every front end, or if you're writing lots of CSS, you should use it, to maybe being something that's more large scale. But as Kilian said, I use it with post CSS as well, because post CSS is useful and they work well together. So
I saw Kilian shaking his head whenever you were saying that, Kevin. So you're both in agreement that CSS should not have like functiony bits? Like, is that?
So it's very, it's complex. So the power of CSS.
I did not mean to put you on the spot. Sorry.
So it's declarative, which is great because then it's deterministic, which means that you can, given a CSS file, you can say with some degree of certainty that this is the output. Whereas if you put functions in, then that's no longer the case. One of the cool things of CSS is that if you spell color the British way, the rest of the website will still work. It'll just ignore that color thing. Whereas if you have a function and it fails, then your program just stops.
Yeah, CSS, as much as it gets kind of ragged on, is incredibly forgiving. like you said, there's a lot it will look over, and it's hard to break. It might not render the way you thought it was going to render, but it's not going to break your site. But that gets into, there's a whole, I would love to host a discussion at one point on, is CSS a programming language / should it be? And I bet we can
because especially if a lot of people believe that it does not have its mitts in the functional business, then to me that means that things like Sass will live on, like just for that solely, so now
but we're seeing like calc functions and some of that stuff that just kind of dips its toes into the function bits start to become more common again.
Listen, I need to know if next year we're gonna have full-blown mix-ins and all the functions available in CSS. That's what I need to know. Okay, so
not next year. I'd put money on that. Not by next year.
Oh man, are there any other? Because I know we're rapidly approaching. Yeah, keep us going.
Yeah. This one, there wasn't a bunch here. Everyone loves prettier. It's really, I would say, my main takeaway. And like my vote's in there too. God bless prettier.
No more 4-hour meetings over how many tabs the
Oh my
CSS file
God.
needs.
Yep. Just set up a prettier and be done. Chrome leading by a wide margin, followed by Firefox, followed by Safari. But I would be interested to see if that shifts, since, as we noted, Safari is taking on a lot more of some of this new stuff coming. I would not be surprised if maybe we saw these guys swap place next year. But
I was surprised
Not
with how high
sure.
up Firefox was.
me too, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
That is
Really?
my least
Surprised,
favorite.
yeah.
I was
Just
going to
'cause-
say, aren't the dev tools like pretty cool on Firefox?
Yeah, I
thought
mean,
they
especially for CSS, I think Firefox has the best ones. Like, it'll tell you why something's not working a lot. Like, if you try doing align items when it's not a flex or a grid item, it'll say this is, your parent isn't a flex or grid item, or this isn't a flex or grid container. So it's not like the fact that it actually tells you why things are going wrong is something that it has way ahead of any other browser, which I love. But it just, I don't know. It just seems whenever people just seem to love Chrome so much. I was really surprised that many people were still using Firefox, which I like. I'm happy to see the diversity.
I think that's important as well. I don't think Safari is going to make big moves unless they bring out a Windows version of Safari.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to see. I don't see it happening.
I know. I'm all for it.
They did
Let's
it
see
before.
it.
And nowadays we have a Microsoft browser on
It's true.
Great.
on Mac again, so anything can happen.
What is this blue? Round one wins? What? I'm so lost.
So
what?
This one was set up as a bracket, like tournament style voting system. And it was how users evaluate choosing a library, which, as a dev advocate for someone, we're not doing a CSS library, but we do have a component library we sell. I was very interested in this data personally. I immediately screenshot this and sent it to some other folks. But documentation being the number one, developer experience being the number two, user experience being the number three. All sounds good, makes a lot of sense to me. I was surprised at the big difference between user experience and accessibility features, although I would almost argue that accessibility is a part of the user experience. So felt like a
Some
thin
of
line.
those choices became really difficult.
Yeah, they really did.
And also, I feel like nobody wants to answer hype, but
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of hype and momentum drive decisions. I'm just going to put it out there, people. Is
I
this
think people
real?
were
Okay,
lying
that
a
was-
little bit on that one.
They're like a little delusional.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't fall into the hype. That's not me.
I'm too cool for that.
Yeah.
But also, I love Tailwind. No, I'm joking. I'm joking on Tailwind. Similarly, we see the same kind of rundown for browsers you test in. Looks actually almost identical to the other list, top 5, except I believe Safari, iOS, and Edge were in flipped positions on the other graph. Testing on desktop, on smartphone, on tablet. Duh, a little bit. And then, but I do think it's interesting. We're seeing more and more of these kind of testing tools coming out. Things like Axe and Lighthouse that will let you test accessibility without necessarily having access to things like a screen reader or an altered vision simulator. So
I hadn't heard of Axe. I didn't know that was one. I've used Lighthouse many times, but I didn't know about Axe.
Axe is really cool, actually. And they're a really good source for just like accessibility information in general. Specifically on accessibility features, we're getting up there, although I will say, worth noting, just graph reading purposes, this one stops at 60%. So keep in mind, we're not looking from a scale from 1 to 100, we're looking at 1 to 60. All text getting up there, semantic markup, thank God we're getting better at. I feel like that's been a crusade for a while. Navigation, ARIA attributes. All of this, though, from ARIA and below is beneath 50% implementation. So
One bit of info or stats that's not from this survey, but from another survey, is that sites who have ARIA attributes on
yeah,
average have more accessibility issues than sites without area attributes.
Interesting.
I've actually, like by digging into certain really specific scenarios, like how do I make this piece work everywhere and with screen readers? I started running across things that would warn you about like, make sure you need this. Like even like will change, for instance, like make sure you need this before you use it. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, because for me, I'm
That's
like, it's a tool.
interesting.
I'm going to use it. Right. So I really, it kind of gives me this sick feeling because I feel like I don't know the perfect way of doing it. And so that's where I'm just like,
Nobody
So
does.
that stuff is very difficult. So the first rule of ARIA is don't use ARIA if there is an appropriate HTML element or attribute. So, but the way the ARIA docs are written, they're written from the standpoint of the ARIA technology. So there's documentation on how to use the ARIA role equals button and how to mark up your div as the perfect button. And it'll have at the top of that page like one liner that says, you should really just use an HTML button.
Please, we're begging you. Just use a button.
Here's how to do it. Because,
and here's the
that's
thing,
what ARIA is
there's
written
so
for.
many times in real life, like real live applications out there. I mean, my husband was working on one last month and I was like, they did what with their sign up form? And he's like, I can't do anything about it. And I'm like, you can't do anything about it? Like, so if you're in the audience right now or you're watching this recording and you're like, but I get you and I feel you. So it's okay. But now also that was something shocking that I learned that, like you're saying, the semantic element over an ARIA label is always going to win. So it feels like an obvious one, but also...
I was kind of thinking about that also when we were talking about this, like, well, do I use vanilla CSS or do I use Sass or do I whatever? I think you start with whatever you can accomplish with the most basic of tools. Start with what you're given, add on as needed. I think it's really easy, especially when you're new, to just feel like, oh, someone told me I needed ARIA and I needed Sass and I needed plus CSS and I needed, whatever. And you grab and all of a sudden you've created this monster and you're like, oh, I just wanted to make, a blog, my own personal blog. All of a sudden you've got this application that is hefty. Like, start with HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript and add on as you need. Once you have it all, it can be easy to think, Yeah, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But
there's a name for that principle called the rule of least power. So whatever you want to accomplish, do it in the language that is the least powerful.
Wait,
and then
what? This is a thing?
Yeah, and that translates very nicely to start with HTML, then at CSS, and only then at JavaScript.
I'm wondering how deep this goes. Dead serious, like to life.
Why are you talking about it like it's a conspiracy?
To cooking, to landscaping. Like, is this everything? Should this be what we live our life on?
It's the add salty taste of web development.
Hope. All right. What are we using CSS for? Web applications by a landslide, and then marketing sites and landing pages. Near and dear to my heart. That's where I started out. Design systems, blogs, mobile apps, emails. My heart's with you. I did that for a little bit too, and honestly, poor one.
Are we all so excited about? Are we excited about the world of emails and CSS and what's coming? No, nobody. Okay,
I don't know if anything's coming. All that's
if you are cursed to write email HTML, check out MJML.
Yeah.
It's a dialect of HTML that looks decent-ish, like it looks like HTML, and it compiles for you to like the most hideous tables in comments in tables in more comments, so that every email viewer can understand it.
I guess I was told, and maybe this person who told me this was not very knowledgeable on the subject, but that as soon as things like Flexbox and Grid are supported, everywhere, that changes the email game. And so we don't have to worry about tables anymore. Is that a lie?
No.
Was I lied
that's
to?
a huge lie. That's a giant
What is
lie.
happening?
Oh my God, no.
No, seriously, why?
I have friends that would sell their left arm to be able to
Yeah.
use
They're-
Flexbox in email development.
The
They would cut it
email,
off right now.
all the email clients are running just such old rendering
Yeah.
things or whatever it is that they're based, and I don't think there's any, and they're all different too. Like, for anyone who does email, like if people complain about browser support today, like first of all, you don't know what it used to be like, I think.
It's a
but
whole other game. in
even if
email.
you compare like to the old days of browser support, like emails 100 times worse, because every single email client will have do something different, and it's not a world that.
No, because
friendly.
I thought it was
Last.
because I thought like Outlook was the last holdout, and they're starting to they're going to support that, I think, within the next year. So that was
the other
it for email
thing-
game. No,
Only
The other
very
thing there is
recently, I think.
that
Go-
email clients also remove a whole lot of
Mhm.
HTML and CSS from
Oh.
emails that they deem dangerous.
oh,
Yeah,
still.
so yeah. Well,
Yeah.
email is a huge spamming opportunity, and it gets delivered, something that gets kind of automatically downloaded right to your computer, right? So normally you had to click a download button. Email just kind of lands in your inbox. And especially if you're using an actual client and not like a web-based browser, that stuff's on your computer, you know?
I don't think you realize the bubble you have popped for me. I was so excited about the email game changing. You all have just ruined it. Just ruined.
So I got out of email development. It was probably 2017, 2018 for me, pseudo recently, not like, yesterday, but just then people were excited because Outlook was no longer rendering things using the Microsoft Word rendering engine. And that was 2017.
Mhm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Lotus Notes is still a thing. Like, it's still all out there, y'all. I don't do it
Yeah,
anymore.
people are saying that, like, and I didn't even know that was a thing. It's called Lotus Notes. I'm gonna look into this.
Lotus
Okay,
Notes.
cool.
Don't
Good
look
to
at it.
know.
Fucking nightmares.
Dreams are crushed. It's fine. Let's move on.
So let's talk about
Oh,
So, how did you learn CSS? The vast majority of folks say self-directed learning, which makes sense to me. Free online courses, videos, on-the-job training. Once you get down to books and below, things start to get a little shaky. I'm curious, how did you guys learn CSS? What was your first step? Would you all fall into the self-directed learning category here?
Yep, I definitely would.
I think, unfortunately, I would fall into the book. I wonder if I still have it. When I was in college, I took a course that made me buy this book called
Nice.
Learning Web Design, A Beginner's Guide to HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Web
Oh,
Graphics,
that's
which should give you a
funny.
feel for how old it is. They didn't spell graphics with an X, but they were only one step away. So, oh man. But yeah, I'm curious. Y'all in the chat, let me know. Where'd you start?
Mhm.
I would bet
yeah, tell us
a
where
lot
you're
of
at.
folks are self-learning. Blogs and magazines, CSS tricks by a landslide, and they've earned
Still
it.
leading.
Smashing.
Ooh, hey,
People
Alyssa
do.
Part. Like, that's my jam. Oh my
Alyssa
gosh.
Part is
A list
fantastic.
of part books. Like, I'm not a book person, like a physical book person, but
I've
their
got a
physical
handful
books
of
get
those.
me.
Yeah.
They're just so concise. And for a person who has extreme ADHD, it's just such a blessing. I don't have time to go through your book this big. I don't have the mental capacity to do it. I just
You don't want me to send
Yeah.
you that textbook I just held up? I'll put it in the mail for you.
Oh, a really good friend of mine recently, Kathryn, mailed me one that was that thick because
Ooh.
she heard I was getting into a certain subject in development. And I just look like it sits over in the corner and stares at me. And I'm like, kind of
taunting you.
like, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. If you're not a book learner, I really want you to release your guilt right now. It's okay. You don't have to be.
Oh, it's hard to write a book in tech. You write something 2 years later, it's obsolete. It's a risky business. Sites and courses, of course, Stack Overflow.
Okay, are we boycotting Stack Overflow? I'm really always out of the political game. So when something's happening in politics world of dev, Kathryn always has to clue me in. It's kind of like how she had to tell me what goat means. Like I just am very clueless. And somebody said something about Stack Overflow. Yeah,
I was mad at him last week.
Yeah. So are we boycotting them? Can I still use them? Anybody have opinions on the subject?
Our coworker Ed was grumpy about Stack Overflow last week, but it was because he had written an answer, I guess, many years ago, and it recently got flagged, and they said, you didn't disclose that you work for Telerik. And he was like, well, I didn't when I wrote the answer. and then he went on like a 5-tweet like,
oh, that's what it was about. I just thought, I don't know. Anytime something like that happens, I just make a mental note, Stack Overflow bad, and I just move on with my life. Like I don't actually read into it. So okay, I understand now. Thank you, Kathryn.
Admittedly ridiculous, but he had a whole like old man shakes fist at cloud kind of
old man shakes fist.
So the one thing I'll say about Stack Overflow is that if you're learning, if you don't yet know what you need to do, then you also don't know whether or not the thing you copy pasted from Stack Overflow is doing it well or correctly or fast. So it can be very hard to judge the quality of stuff on Stack Overflow. And then, like as you mentioned, like the older the answers get, the more likely you are to having like a suboptimal or a no longer working solution.
Yeah.
So if you had to choose between Stack Overflow and MDN, definitely MDN.
Go with the docs.
Okay,
yeah,
I see.
Go with MDN.
I don't know. Somebody also, I've heard MDN is the devil, so I just really try to stay out of it. Like if it helps me fix my bug, I'm like, I don't know. I should probably care more about the politics of things, but I was told that also recently. So I'm like, so you're leaving me with nothing. I can read from nowhere.
I think you can do with caring less. So someone asked, why is MDN bad? Let's spend one sentence on that and then move on. So Mozilla, the non-profit organization behind Firefox and MDN, announced that they were taking donations in crypto, which is bad for the environment. So a lot of people were not happy with them. I see. They have since rescinded that, so they are no longer accepting donations in crypto. So we can all go back to MDN again.
I'm with you now. Okay.
Something specifically with MDN. I was like, what happened with the MDN site? What did they say? But I forgot about the Mozilla.
Okay. I'm with you now. Yeah. No, I'm honestly just grateful for both of them because there's so many times that I found like I have these really weird environment things that go on and I'm like one other person in the world, has had it happen. So thank you for those who pass it on. What were you saying, Kevin? Sorry.
I see the web dev is the fourth one there. And I know, like they used to have a lot of just like general articles on like especially like performance and other stuff. Like they've always had good documentation on stuff, but they have Google hired Rachel Andrew not too long ago, I think, and they had Andy Bell come in too, and they did like a whole Learn CSS thing that goes. It's like a free. It covers like a lot of the material, so also just as like I think that's a really good and very up to date one. But MDM is usually my go-to still, but web dev might be the secondary one now.
Good to know. Podcasts. I gotta level with y'all. There's no way I'm listening to development podcasts. That's my free time. That's my downtime. I respect the 13.1% of y'all that are on the grind enough to listen to development podcasts in your downtime. But it's not me, fam. So
isn't the CSS podcast, is that Yuna's?
Yeah.
Does anybody know
that
off
with,
the top of her head? Yeah,
with Adam Argyle, yeah.
Happy Hour and Ladybug.
Smoking. Just like, yes, like, I don't know, the bite-sizedness of it. And so, Kathryn, sometimes, yes, it's for free time. Other times it's like, I don't understand this CSS thing. We are here in our downtime. Yeah, I mean, they have a point. They do have a point.
They have a really great
this
point.
Is Twitch. Yeah, we love you all for
I'm
watching.
No, we really do. And everyone just processes different ways. Like some people are really good at that, have something on in the background, like absorb it that way. If you can learn code while you wash the dishes, I'm jealous. I want it to be.
Is this Kilian? Are you saying I do that? That's how I learn code? Is this you saying? Okay.
I cannot listen to a podcast and do something else unless it's driving. So I can drive and listen to a podcast, but if I do anything else, I either like get distracted, or I just don't absorb any of the talking happening while I'm doing something more interesting elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm on a couple podcasts, like actual ones, not twitchy ones, and they was something that we like. I don't think this counts as a podcast. Personally, I don't think this is podcast, but some people will say it is. I don't know. Like
we spent the last 5 minutes just dunking on our own show.
I know. But one thing that we like to keep in mind with podcasts is this is just to let people know what's out there. Like it's a really good way of like, because you're right. Like oftentimes people are doing other things and they can't take notes or even try it out in the browser while they're listening. And so it's just, this is really cool. Have you tried it? And so it's in the back of your mind as something that exists because there's just so much of it to keep track of. So I'm an auditory learner. So I've got an Audible account. That's how I chug through books. So if you're in there and you're on that podcast list, I get you. I see you.
Oh man, People, which was a new one this year. Am I right? We didn't. This is
Kevin, are you so happy, Kevin? Oh my gosh, he's blushing.
Look at it by a chunk. Look at this.
I don't know. I don't know how that happened, but
we know you pay people in candy, Kevin.
I don't know.
You don't get excited? I personally would just be like, yeah.
I don't know.
Kevin, how many times
makes me so shy and just I look at the other names that are on there and it's all the people like I learned everything from, and I'm just like, no, like you're listening to the wrong person if I'm at the top of the list. I don't know.
No. You got great stuff out there. That's why people are excited about it.
I'm very glad that I can help enough, a lot of people with it. It obviously makes me feel good that like people appreciate my material and can connect with it and they feel like they learn from it. So like it validates what I'm doing, which is obviously incredible. It is for me seeing like the people that I'm over on that list is just like, these are all smarter people than me that I just sort of, I learn from them and then, steal their ideas and everything. And then, so it's, it is a little, it's humbling in a sense, but it's all, I don't know. I don't have the right words to say what I want to say, I guess.
What blows my mind, because for those in the audience who didn't take the survey and you're seeing 259 and you think that's a low number, these were free form. Like people had to write in with their fingers, like the names. Mm-hmm. Like, so that to me is like massive and super huge because I don't think a lot of people take time to write in, like even if, they do learn everything from Kevin. So to me, that speaks to a volume more of people. So I think that's really, really cool. Yeah, there you go. 19%. Question response. Yeah. Okay. So that's so cool. I'm very flattered to be on the show with you, sir.
Oh God, no.
Oh man.
Are
you sure we can't all get your autograph?
I know. I was like, can you sign the show? How would that even work? Okay. Yeah. Fuel saying I didn't know anyone else either. On the list. Oh, I see. That I honestly, there's so many big names in these. I've heard of most of them.
Names. Kevin, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Also, Chris Coyer is CSS Tricks, which is a fantastic resource. Jen Simmons, I've already exposed my small amount of hero worship. Both Jen and Rachel Andrew are like, I think I would be like, you know, when you get to meet like the artist backstage at a concert, you're just like, this is amazing. I'll never wash his hand again. Like that would be me. It would be horrific.
Poor Chris. I did that to him whenever I first met him at a conference. I was like, I'm pretty sure I made this face at him. And he was just, I think he backed away. It wasn't good. I'm not really, I try not to meet those people anymore. I just, poor Kevin. He's just had to deal with it on stream.
No, I'd agree. In general, I try to stay away from hero worship because everybody is, they're just people working on stuff that they love to do, you know, and they're humans and they'll do great stuff and they'll make mistakes and everything else because they're not idols. They are people. But at the same time, I have a tremendous amount of respect for some of the people on this list, especially, again, kind of as we talked about the folks in the CSS working group and the folks that are really putting in that time to hone the specs and move CSS forward are especially like, man, that's so cool. I
think this is just a cool list to have for like people wanting to get deeper in CSS, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
this is such a
just
cool
look up these
list.
names and the resources that follow. Yeah.
So follow them on Twitter and you'll be fine. You'll know everything that's happening in CSS.
I mean, Brad Frost's Atomic Design. Brad Frost, I also think is great. He's put out some really great work on kind of transitioning from that, like, I don't want to say early, but that like HTML, CSS focused front-end development into the modern world of front-end development now. And that shift to like framework-based development and the kind of knowledge gap that happens when you started doing one thing and have kind of had to move, which was a space I found myself in. I really enjoyed his writing on that. Yeah, and there's some, like, I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet from Dan that was like, how'd I end up on this CSS list? Which was hilarious.
Is that weird for him to be on here? I thought it made sense. I don't know. It made logic to me. I was like, yep.
It's a JavaScript guy mostly, right?
Well, I mean, Rachel Andrews too, though. Like, that's how I know her, is from the JavaScript world. And so I saw her on here and I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense too. Like, because she's
Rachel Andrews
in both. I love it.
Yeah, she's in both. But yeah, I would definitely think of like Grid when I think of Rachel. But yeah, overall, just an incredible list. Just goals. Hashtag goals.
Hashtag goals. Kevin, I mean, you're done, right? Like where do you go from here? Yeah. You just, bye.
Live on a farm.
Live on a farm. You joke, but you would not believe how many people that's like the dream, to like retire to their farm. Like it's
What was the stuff in the introduction? You have to take up woodworking or painting. All right.
Oh, opinions.
Right, we're getting near to the end. How much time do we have left? Do we need to sign off? We have like 15 minutes.
Yeah, we are over our 90 minutes a lot of times. So Kevin and Kilian, if you need to jump, we did yak
Totally
a bunch, but also we're here to we can also take some time to wrap and go through.
I'm happy to stay for a bit. It's evening here and there's lockdown, so I have nowhere to be.
Then yeah, absolutely. Stay with us is the chat.
CSS is easy to learn. Pink is agree. Okay.
Most folks agree.
Okay.
Yes. Handful. Most don't agree strongly. Probably neutral and agree are our leaders. And I don't think anyone disagreed strongly. Or maybe just a few. CSS is evolving too slowly.
So
this, I think, is an
going to
interesting
change
shift.
The most next year, I think.
Right. I mean, look at this shift even 2 years ago to now. That percentage has doubled, which is amazing. Utility classes should be avoided. Oh.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at
Barely
The
holding
light
it.
bulb. The light bulb is cracking me up right now. Another
nice,
guaranteed
isn't
scientific
it?
finding. That just gets me. Like that kind of messaging just makes me want to go buy a shirt. Like it gets me. Sorry. Anyways, back to the chunkies, the utilities. Here we go. The chunky. Utility classes center large text. Oh.
This
Wait,
is so
what?
interesting to me.
Yeah.
Well, because I remember when like object-oriented CSS was like such a thing, right? And it was like, this is the future, this is how we're all gonna write CSS. And we've seen even just that kind of come and go. And when I think about this kind of utility classes, it's not exactly the same, but this kind of attempting to architect how we write CSS. And I am not surprised at all by how scattered these results are.
I am. Okay, let's look at these results and then let's go look at the vote for Tailwind. What? No, they should match, right? Like it's
No, you
it hurts.
can use Tailwind and be neutral on this chart.
Okay,
that's
we're gonna have to have a talk. You and me. Can you? You can be neutral on that chart and use Tailwind?
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of it.
Just to
Because
jump back-
If you join a
Just to
team
jump back
and
and
they
look at
use
the
Tailwind,
Oh,
just
right.
as you join a team
right.
and they use less.
Yeah, Tailwind's at a 39% usage as of this chart. And
Okay.
right, opinions neutral, about 30%. So I'm just saying, and not necessarily that it's a one-to-one connection, but that when we're talking about percentages.
Mhm.
Mm.
What's interesting on this chart is that the middle isn't disappearing. It can feel on Twitter and like the general discourse that this is a very dividing topic, but if you look at the past few years, it's just like everyone's more or less around the middle.
That's definitely where I'd fall. I've written some CSS. I've written a lot of CSS in a lot of different ways. Been at a handful of different companies that all had different opinions and CSS style guides. And I got to tell you that there's not one where I was like, that's it. That's the way to write CSS, and everyone else can go jump off a cliff. Like, they all worked. They all rendered.
They all rendered. I mean, most of them rendered. We shouldn't say they all rendered.
They all rendered except for the stuff I wrote. No, I'm joking.
I enjoy writing CSS. Oh, it's good to see so much pink.
I mean, a little bit of bias, obviously. People that would be so moved to fill out.
Oh, because we're taking the survey
about
right.
CSS.
Right. You always have to bring me down to earth, and I hate that. I just want you to know I like to live up in the clouds with the rainbows and the unicorns, madam. You're always bringing your logic into this.
But agree, like, it's nice. At least most of the people who filled out this survey who work with CSS regularly like to write CSS. And I think there's probably a grain of truth. Really a grain of truth in that too, that like if more people were forced to actually engage with CSS regularly and got good at writing it and kind of learned the way that it works and is different from other programming languages or other programming approaches, they would probably grow to like it too. But it's different. It's just different, and there's a learning curve, I think. Yeah.
Well put.
Selection bias.
Selection bias.
Browser incompatibilities.
This one's
Grid.
confusing because how is this a vote? Are we voting on this, or is this just actual? Because shouldn't we? I'm confused. Features that have difficulties.
The input. For
Okay,
this.
so the question.
The question is on top there.
Yeah. So if you
Yeah, I
have
was
difficulties
trying to-
using it because of the differences, okay, I'm with you.
Was this just a blank input box, or was this were there options for selection? I don't remember for this one.
I don't remember either.
But either way, grid leading the pack. And then gap, and then subgrid, which I mean, yeah, subgrid's not supported on all the browsers. I don't think so. That would make it difficult to use. It feels like it's in
Yeah,
this
and then
in the
gap
letter
is
of the law, but not the
interesting.
spirit.
Yeah, I thought
because-
Gap does work. Does it work?
Yeah,
Grid
but
technically also
now so there used to be Gap for Grid, and
Mhm.
then
Right.
there was Flex Gap, and then they figured that thing does the same, so why not just support Gap for Flexbox? But that meant that in older browsers there was not a way to figure out if the gap in that particular browser also worked for Flexbox or just for Grid.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah, that was annoying.
And
But
and that can be very annoying. But that's like at least half a year, maybe even a year ago. So
Is it still a problem? Like
I don't think
now
so.
that
it depends
'Cause
how
I-
far back you have to support the browsers,
Yeah.
but all
I
the
see.
modern browsers support it now.
Okay.
Question here, CSS Houdini. We touched on this ever so briefly before. Oh, maybe it was just the setup for a punchline. Ha! Well, too bad I took it seriously. Now we're going to talk about it for real. CSS Houdini is what has been, I guess the name is being used to describe the CSS Paint API. Would either of you guys like to take a swing at describing what's included in that API? What we can do with it?
Take it away, Kevin.
No, it's black
Ooh.
magic to me. So
Okay,
I'll let you do it.
Yeah, so CSS Houdini are a set of lower level APIs that let you write your own CSS resolution. And with that, I mean that you could write, for example, your own background function or your own layout function or your own text coloring function.
I just hear like sirens and red flags going off. Does this not scare the heck out of you? Like
You and Bindal both, evidently.
So to make it concrete, like earlier, I mentioned that you could use CSS Houdini Paint worker to create your own background for an element. And then in that paint worker, you essentially get a sort of canvas that you can then use JavaScript to do anything on. And then that canvas gets rendered as a background image. But you can also have a CSS Houdini layout worker. And for example, you could use that to implement your own masonry layout. So that's a thing that doesn't exist in browsers, but a lot of people want to use. Like it's the Pinterest layout where everything fits into each other.
Yep.
And you can write that. You can lay that out with JavaScript, and the CSS Houdini layout worker will let you do that on a lower level than just doing it directly in JavaScript. Because
that is so cool.
everything's
Okay,
already on the
I
page,
see.
and you then have to move everything around. And the layout API will let you do the layouting before the rendering.
Right. Because if you're doing it, I've done things like that with JavaScript and it was super jank. Like
It's very chunky. Yes.
there are some weird bugs.
But I will tell you, every client wants it, or at least
it is part of the level 3 for Grid, and it's already implemented in Firefox nightly at least, but it's buggy in there. It's not perfect, but once Subgrid's been implemented, that will be the next step for Grid.
So it sounds like Kevin and Kilian live on this bleeding edge, and I just need to know: is there a place that you go to like read, like just one place, one resource, so that you can stay on that edge and use your post CSS magic and be like, I just live in the future? Or no, you do the work and you read everywhere? No?
I'm deeply just fighting the urge to say that I just read Kevin's articles. I'm sorry.
I know for me, a lot of it ends up just being like I'll be researching something, and then I often end up on the MDM and go down some weird rabbit hole into things I've never heard of before, and then sort of learn more that way. If not that, it's somebody on Twitter or a CSS Tricks article, often that sort of mentions something, and then I have to research it and find out what it is.
Okay.
I spend, I think, more time in like Blink proposals and like browser issue tracking. So a lot of stuff happens there before there's articles about that. So if you really want to go on the bleeding edge, then that's where you can find a whole bunch of stuff.
Nice. Has it bitten you though? Like being like, okay, so this is where things are headed. I'm going to start using it. And then you have to kind of backtrack when, I don't know, maybe they pivot in a different direction, or have you not found that to be the case?
So I am building my own browser using Blink. So I get to decide the rendering engine it uses and the version of that rendering engine. So I can just use like whatever is supported in the version that I choose. So it hasn't bitten me yet. I can just be like, accent color, well, that's a thing now. Turn it on and use it before.
And it's a thing. I love. Okay, yeah. I'm with you.
I get where you're coming from, but also I fixed it by building my own browser is probably not the answer most of the chat was hoping for.
Fair enough.
They're all like, thanks.
Cool, I'll get right on that.
Oh, pain points, browser compatibility. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. Build my own browser. That's on the to-do list for future Kathryn. But yeah, unsurprisingly, browser compatibility is still top of the list. Although I will say again, leaps and bounds beyond where CSS used to be, even 5-10 years ago. It's a whole different ballgame out there, compatibility-wise. Like, thank God. But still, worth keeping in mind.
I'm surprised responsive design got so much.
Architecture, maintenance, form elements. Oof. And then responsive design. I think I personally ranked form elements higher. but yeah, responsive design is interesting.
That's changing. That will change. There is a lot of work happening on form elements.
Forms.
So there's something called the OpenUI working group, and they're working on implementing new defaults for form elements and making them more stylable for us web developers. So right now they're working on like a disclosure widget, so accordions or tabs, and also the select element, which is famously unstylable.
Oh yeah, Mama's got her own jank solution for that.
Well, I've seen some of that, like accent color helps with some of that, right? Accent color applies to like radio buttons and some of the stuff that was also previously annoyingly pretty unstylable.
Yeah, so the things they're looking at is like more rich form elements. So a select with an icon in it, for example. That's something that a lot of UIs need, and that's not something you can do with the native solution. So everyone writes their own JavaScript one, and each one of those is broken in a different way. That's not ideal, so it should really be in the browser.
I'm a little confused though. So this OpenUI working group, that they just came together and said, we're doing this. I guess I'm confused on how they work with the current process like that exists.
Oh, so they're spearheaded by Microsoft, I think.
Okay.
As well as, again, anyone can join if they want to. And the idea is that they are experimenting and coming up with new ideas, and then they can bring that to browser vendors.
Thindle, both Kathryn and I have the capability to do this. Yes. That this is like literally, I just wish I could point the camera down. I've got like, from what Kilian and Kevin had told me today, I've got these like probably 20 sticky notes I've written out. One just says Open UI working group, because that's a thing that I need to know about. Like, gosh, so much knowledge here today. So grateful for it. Seriously.
It really has been fantastic. Features missing from CSS, which again, I believe this was bracket style, which is why it's separated into round 1, round 2, round 3. What a terrible bracket to make us go through. This was grueling to make classes in. I remember doing this, and it was
really. It
gonna
was
go ahead and
so,
say-
I was like, parent selector. That's it. for
Really?
me,
You were just like,
personally.
click, click, click?
I was just like
Oh,
that.
no.
Because
Having-
since the day I started using CSS, day one, I asked my husband how to do that. And he said, it's not a thing. And I've been asking, no, but there's got to be a way around it. And he goes, it's not a thing. So yeah, it was easy for me.
I want all of these, and having to choose between them was severe emotional damage. So-
The good news
Oh.
is that nearly all of these are coming.
honestly, yeah. Yeah.
And we're
they're
excited
coming-
about that, right?
they're-
Like, we're not
they're
scared about
coming
that.
so
We're
soon,
excited.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're coming so soon that to me,
Mhm.
it's not even like, oh, we know that will be here in 5 years. It's like, no, some of these will be here this year. Like, that's amazing. Oh, most of them actually.
It's really, yeah. I'm incredibly hyped for literally all of these. I went to go pick one out to end that sentence, and then I couldn't.
You really can't. You don't have a favorite. Like, really. Nothing.
I think I might have to root for the underdog and say color functions. I just went down a rabbit hole recently of looking at P3 colors and the expanded range of what P3 colors are going to be able to offer us, and the new methods for defining those colors, of which color is one, but then also like LCH and some of the things that are coming. And I'm ready. They look so nice. Being able to just be able to offer that wider gamut of color is cool. And then especially, I don't think LCH is technically, it's its own thing and not part of color functions, but I love the way that it's written. I think it's a lot more intuitive than hex or RGB colors are right now in terms of writing and adjusting from code alone without having to go back and reference like a color picker to be able to look and say, oh, I want it a little bit lighter, or I want it, I want to adjust the lightness chroma hue. To me is much more intuitive in terms of seeing a color and going, oh, I actually wanted that a little brighter, or I wanted that a little darker, or I wanted it a little more saturated, or whatever, than looking at a hex code and going like,
Are you saying you don't memorize hexes? Is that what you're telling me?
Although I was talking on Deaf by Design this morning. I read an incredible article. It was a while ago. It wasn't a recent one, where there was a guy who was colorblind and had learned how to read the hex code so specifically that he could make adjustments to it, because he was vision impaired in the more traditional sense. And he was like, yeah, looking at colors really wasn't doing anything for me anyway. So I took the scientific approach.
Learned how to read it. Yeah.
And he learned how to read hex colors, so he could just be like, yeah, I want it to be a little bit more of this, and write the hex. And I was like, oh, that's a legitimate superpower.
Yeah.
So cool.
Oh, so there's a question here, and I know the gist of how, but I would love to hear Kevin and Kilian. Previous sibling, will that be doable with has? And then also Thindle was throwing out this gorgeousness. Can we speak to that real quick on just the future?
So the way to think of the has selector is that you would write out a full selector. So let's say you have a div with a button and an image in it, and you want to style the div based on what's in the div. So you would have a selector that is div link or button plus image, and then that button plus image you would wrap in a has, and now you're targeting the div that has a button and an image. And that's the way to think about the has selector. So you still
don't
have
need
the
to
full selector.
know what that is. You're just saying whatever it is, right? Like, you're not specifying div. Right. You're just saying
rather than
whoever
necessarily
owns
having
these.
to have an ID or a class name attached to a div. You can look for a div that has the contents that you're looking for.
Yeah, so the way you write selectors isn't going to change. So you're not going to write a.a class parent. You're still going to write div.div class a.class, which is the example Thindle gave. But then you're going to wrap that a.a class in parents has or colon has. So the selector will still read from like top to bottom as your HTML structure.
Hmm.
You're just selecting a specific part in that long selector string that you want to target.
Honestly, that sounds like black magic, like how this is working.
Yes,
You just kind of
because
hurt my head a
you
lot.
can't-
little
Like,
bit.
what?
you don't just select you can't just select a parent, but you can also select previous siblings, or even the contents of previous siblings, or the length of
Hmm.
a div inside a div, and then like if it's even or odd number of children, like all the
Yeah.
things we can do in CSS now to target a thing, we can use to target any parent of that thing.
Thank you. Okay. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. And someone said XPath is coming. I don't know what that is, but that sounds scary. Oh, excellent. I love that explanation. Mm-hmm. So, Thindle, I don't think you need the div part. I think it's just :has a.a class.
Can be
Oh,
both.
I don't know about
Can be
previous
both.
sibling. Oh, okay. Okay. And
so
then
the thing inside the has can be a
Yes.
what they call a complex selector as well.
I'm so excited for that. How
That'll be
happy are
nice.
we, Kathryn? I must know how happy we are. Are
I
we
mean, in
happy?
general, or would you say with the state of general web technologies? So
We're
most people,
50% happy.
honestly, a higher percentage than I was expecting.
Really?
Like, oh yeah, no. One of the things that I think, and I don't say it to be mean, but just like once you start writing for the web, you realize how much everything is a little bit held together with like tin cans and string and scotch tape, and you're like, oh, I thought this was black magic, and now I've learned it. And it turns out that even I could write this, which is a horrifying realization. So,
Oh, that's so funny.
yeah. One of my favorite tweets is that one where it's like, remember when you're frustrated with a bug, computers are just rocks that we tricked into thinking. Like, I think about that all the time. So it's not to say that I'm unhappy with the general state of web technologies, but yeah, I think I voted neutral on this. Like, we're getting better all the time. It's amazing.
I'm always surprised that we're not like, 99% happy, because I'm just like, the web's amazing. So that's where I'm at. But yeah. So I'm always baffled by people who have opinions, because I'm like, wait, what? You don't think it's amazing? So yes, it's funny. We need to get together more often, Kathryn. I feel like it's good for my world.
No, I mean, it's definitely, what's out there is cool, and it's getting better all the time. Like, you heard me say that, but then you also heard me gush about P3 colors for like 5 minutes earlier. So, a little column A, a little column B. But it's just interesting. The further we get, it feels like the more we expose what we can't do yet. And kind of like we were just talking about, like, oh man, like it's crazy that we can't do parent selectors. Like that was the first thing I asked, and it's still not quite a thing, and maybe it will be soon, but we don't have it yet. Like you could go through that whole rant and your answer was happy. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, because I see where we've come from. And so I'm just like, dude, we're moving fast. We're moving too fast. We gotta slow down, people. Like, so that's where I'm. Rocks we lit on fire and melted together. Yeah.
Just rocks and fire. Big lamp on a rock in space. Like, don't think about it too long. It's all a little bit horrifying. But no, like, the web is only 30 years old. So, of course, we've got room and we've got growing pains. I don't look at it necessarily as like, it's not perfect and so I quit so much as like, there's room for us to grow. We're still in the relative infancy of the web when you think about it.
I think it's because I'm a Boolean person. So I don't have a neutral. Like it's either I'm happy or I'm very unhappy, So I had to pick happy. That's why I'm always so surprised. I'm like, who voted for neutral? Like what? That's a thing? There's neutral? Like Kathryn's like, that was me.
Oh yeah. No, I mean 5 years ago in the United States, the web would not be old enough to rent a car. So let's not get too like,
Oh, that's weird to think about. That's weird.
That's what I'm saying.
Also,
Like,
Kilian, do you have a tea bag in your cold tea beverage? Is that possible? How are you brewing tea cold in front of my eyes?
It was warm when we started.
Oh, you didn't start putting it in ice. Okay. I thought you actually had like ice water with the tea. Okay. I'm with you. Okay. I'm sorry. That was super distracting.
what a call out.
I just need to know if I was doing tea wrong. I thought maybe there was something I didn't know about. How happy are you with the general state? Okay. So pretty much the same, right? Close.
Yeah, honestly, very similar results if we look. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps slightly more neutral. Which
I know
is,
that
I probably
there's a
would've voted
wrap-up
better.
section. Oh, would you? There's a wrap-up section that Kilian did, and I wanted to know if there was any things we didn't touch on. That I mean, obviously, go read the beautiful wrap-up, but anything on the sign-off or conclusions that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, so a lot of these are in active development. So container queries, cascade layers, aspect ratio, and custom properties are recent. There's stuff happening on custom media properties. There's stuff happening on media query ranges, which up till now only Firefox supports. That when else thing sounds really cool, but it's very early. The one thing here that has already been fairly well thought out, but no browser movement is on yet, is CSS nesting. One of the things that most of the browser developers or browser makers want us developers to do is indicate their interest in new CSS features using their bug reporting. So Chromium, for example, has a bug on chromium.org specifically for CSS nesting. And the more people press the little star button, the sooner someone at Google gives the green light for someone to start building that. So that is a power that we all have. We can tell them what we want to see happen in browsers. So don't hesitate if you want a hash selector or you want CSS nesting or whatever. Search out that issue, that bug report in the browser and star it.
Yeah, Findle was saying, isn't Chromium OSS? I'm a little confused on that myself.
Yes, it is. So you are also more than welcome to implement the feature yourself, but you know, it's probably easier to star it. But yeah, so just implementing the feature is literally what Igalia is doing, right? So they took things that don't work in one browser but work in all the other browsers, and they just build it. And they're like, now it works in this browser too. So it's something you can do. Building a browser is not that easy. You need a whole lot of very specific knowledge to work on something like Blink or WebKit or Gecko. But it could be cool if you want to learn that. I say go for it. We'll all be happy when you contribute cool new features to any browser.
Sorry, catching up on chat.
I know. There's a lot happening in the chat.
There is. There's a lot happening. I love you, chat, by the way. You're all beautiful.
Seriously.
Thank you for your
You
comments.
guys have been great.
Well, that was any wrap-up conclusions from Kilian. Kevin, do you have anything else that we didn't touch on, or just anything you'd like to say to the people?
No, yeah. I mean, I'm really excited just, I guess, for where things are headed going forward. Now it seems like CSS is speeding up its growth and everything these days, and it's fun to see where things are going. So yeah, I guess that's about it for me.
Oh my goodness, this was amazing. Well, I am just humbled by the knowledge shared today and grateful for all of you and for chat and for keeping up the vibes. I think that was it, right, Kathryn? Anything else we wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that's it. We covered actually a huge amount of information going
really
through
did.
the entirety of the results there. And there were definitely things that I learned. So I'm thrilled that we got the chance to talk to both of you, Kevin and Kilian. That was really fantastic. Thank you guys both.
My pleasure.
My pleasure too. Thanks for having me.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody, or morning, wherever you are. And we will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.